everybody. Welcome to the OCTO Smart Talks. I'm Giuseppe Lucido, and I'll be your host during the next half hour or so. I'm a vice president at Edelman, and I've been working for a few years now together with OCTO. Today is the day for a new Smart Talks, the major one from my point of view, since today we'll be addressing the topics of big data and in the Internet of Things, or IoT. Both of them trending topics, as well as technologies at the very heart of OCTO's business. In order to better understand what big data and IoT mean today, we'll check where we are from a practical standpoint and try to imagine future developments of both big data and IoT. Joining us today are Tina Martino, Head of Strategic Marketing and Intelligence, and Fabio Squatrito, Head of Solution Engineering of OCTO. Tina, Fabio, welcome. Hi, first of all.
Hi, all.
Hi.
Let's start from trying to understand what do we talk about when we talk of big data and IoT. Tina, up to you.
Yes, thank you. So IoT is transforming the human experience thanks to the daily interaction with lots of connected objects and with a trend which is impacting on large scale a wide range of organizations with broad implication across multiple industries, technologies, regions, and economies. This generates a huge quantity of data growing at 8 rate, which are analyzed, processed, to drive a new intelligence behind the innovation of traditional business. And this produces also a huge impact on business activities as operation, production of new services. We can say that IoT and big data are the two forces of the fastest revolution in the human story, which are fully driving us in the society, in the information society, and in a complete hyper-connected, always-on world. I like to remind that the Internet of Things is not so recent as a concept, but yet at the beginning it was about how to integrate people, processes, and technology with connected device and sensor to enable the remote working, status, and manipulation. So devices are important in the IoT as enabler of new interface between the physical world and the digital world, which are fastly melting together. Today, Internet of Things and the IoT can be distinguished into three main aggregations. The commercial IoT, which in some way includes healthcare, smart buildings, smart cities, retail, and agriculture. And industrial IoT. Industrial IoT includes utilities, transportation, and all the manufacturer. And consumer IoT, that includes mostly the typical consumer application as the wearable, fitness, entertainment, and connected car too. All these applications count now, as reported by Gartner, more than 9.6 billion of connected IoT devices at the end of 2019, which are expected to grow and to reach 28 billion by 2027. With a prediction of 5.8 billion that are linked more to the enterprise and automotive IoT endpoint in 2020, because automotive is a huge part of this growth of the IoT. And when we come to consider the data that are generated by all these sources, we can also classify them depending on what are their sources. So the first one, let's say, are the machine and sensors. Computer log file, cameras, and so all the objects that are connected also to the physical machinery. Corporation, and so all the information about transaction, e-commerce, sales, medical records. But I would say what is important also to consider are the more than 75% smartphone penetration that there is the installed base in the world. And so we people generate per minute tons of emails and content that are necessary for us also to understand and to explore how to improve this digital relation between the physical and the digital world. So AI and machine learning are the tool that we can use to see as a microscope within the essence of this huge quantity of data, generating as outcome some a new type of knowledge, the insights that were never imagined from before the discovery of this original data. And this is the real value. So the insight and the actionable insight that we can derive from this object, this is the real value that is driving this fast digital revolution.
Okay, so that's easier now to understand why we call it a revolution, because it's a real revolution, something that can really change where we are. There are lots of possibilities ready to change several aspects of the world we live in today. Fabio, let's hear from you what exactly is this change and how data will become key to rethink and possibly redesign the world as we know it.
Yes, thank you, Giuseppe. So what drives the change? What is the enabler for this very relevant transformation, this revolution that Tina has introduced? I think there are key enablers, some key components that somehow enable and drive the change to the, let's say, correct use of data coming from IoT. First of all, we can think to the ecosystem. Yesterday, a typical data generator will, let's say, use data to manage proprietary services. So it's closed environment, and the customer will receive services only from the, let's say, companies included in this closed ecosystem. Today, the world is changing. The level of opportunity that an open ecosystem creates is the key for the success of any transformation based on the data, on the IoT data. So basically working in an open ecosystem with external parties that based on the same data will enrich that data and will add value to the entire value chain in order to create innovative services is one of the key that drive the change to let's say, an IoT-oriented world. On the other side, there is the technology. Technology, for sure, is a very strong enabler, is a very, let's say, facilitator to drive the change in this direction. Yesterday, the technology was very, let's say, old somehow, so was not able to process localized information. We will see later on the importance of edge computing, but for sure, having a platform that works in a very closed environment with a proprietary logic, it's something that is against the concept of an open environment and an open platform. So the direction to go is to work on the microservice space, having multiple atomic elements that can be merged in many use cases, business use cases, that can, let's say, be delivered by not one platform, but many platforms collaborating together. So the concept of open platform is very key in the new world of the IoT. Last but not the least is the importance of the customer. So yesterday the customer was logically receiving services. Today they want to have personalized services. So in order to arrive to a new customer experience that the market and the expectation of the customer is having, it's another strong element that drives the change. So customer wants new services, wants to have dynamic content, wants to have dynamic ability to turn on and off the type of services that they are, let's say, intended to pay. And when we say pay, it's pay providing data or paying acquiring new services. In both directions, there is a more concrete, let's say, awareness of the power of the data that every one of us is generating. And so the contribution that every single person, every single consumer is able to provide to the community will create, let's say, a value added, but also on the other side will, let's say, ask for a personalized customer experience with dynamic content and flexible content.
Thank you, Fabio, for helping us understand the complex process that moves our whole ecosystem, as you called it. But I wonder, Tina, how do big data and IoT contribute to design the change and, above all, add value to the business?
So we have already said that IoT and big data are the enablers of this digital transformation. We can say that they are the arms, but the art of the digital transformation lies in the specific use cases, as Fabio was saying before. So when we consider how to extract value from the IoT and big data, the right question is, what is the business task, our real life experience that we want to manage or to improve? If we agree on the principle that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So we will also agree on fact that with connected sensor, we can measure and therefore manage much more better than ever before. We can make better prediction, we can make also better and smarter decision, and also we can target more effective operation. So the physical environment, including factories, offices, and the smart city, are becoming smart spaces within which people will interact from multiple sensors, augmenting also their cognitive and physical capability. Connected devices devices in this sense are opening the world and are blurring the boundaries of the traditional market too. And this is the reason why a new use case cannot be designed in the new digital space, considering the silos approach that we have in the past when we designed the let's say, traditional process. So when we need to define a new product that is based on the IoT, this is the solution for the task to be done, and it will be implemented eventually on a new operating model, exploiting also a new business approach, which must bring value to all the stakeholders that are involved in the supply chain. Of course, we will consider the right sensor to put in the environment, but what is important is to write to take the right data, to collect data properly, and to manage this data through specific applications that are the core also of this kind of architecture, where, for example, algorithm as the AI and machine learning can extract the knowledge that is necessary to, for example, augment the value for the market, for the specific needs that we are addressing. Let's think, for example, to the predictive maintenance in the automotive environment. And finally, what is also important to know is that we must design since the beginning also how this product comply with the privacy rule, because the orchestration of all the new digital process must be done in coherence with all the rules that are, let's say, defined by the GDPR, just to meet, of course, the regulation, but also to gain the market trust that is something more than just the application of a rule. In conclusion, I would add that, of course, data-driven decision tends to be better decision respect to the past, but this doesn't erase the need for a human vision and a human insight. So people must, in any case, manage this kind of intelligence that is augmenting their capability and our capability, let's say.
Absolutely. And the processes just described, Tina, must necessarily include other technology, equally complex technology processes. Fabio, what are the tech features that help adding value to the business?
Yes, we use an example. We call it the dark side of the moon. It's a silly example just to describe that behind the scene, behind the fact that there is a very strong focus on the customer experience, a very tailor-made customer experience, very 360 view on the customer in terms of their need. This means to have behind the scene a very strong technology, some technology enablement capabilities that somehow, let's say, hide the complexity. So it should not be visible to the customer, the complexity, but on the same time, this complexity need to be in place. Which are the key enabler of this is let's say, magic word where we put the customer at the center. We use data to tailor-made the service that we provide to the customer. For sure, there is one logic, one key element that is edge computing. So today, with the level of the penetration that also Tina was mentioning before, 75% of the people in the world have currently a smartphone in their hands, and most probably one of the less effective smartphone today has more processing power than the moon lander 20 years ago, let's say 40 years ago, when the man get to the moon. So for sure, there is a giant leap from the processing capability, and this now brings to the let's say people having in their hands a computer. As a matter of fact, it's a computer. So we have a lot of processing capability on the edge. This processing capability is able to, let's say, filter the data, not only collect the data, but use the data, apply algorithm on board of the edge, so on board of the device on the field, and filter the data, trying to select only the right big data. That's a very important concept, because in a moment where we see there are so many data generator points on the field, we need to be able to select the type of information that we collect and focus only on the value-added information. On the other side, there is all the, let's say, communication aspect to take data from the, let's say, field up to the processing platform. We need to have the ability to work with the device logically always on. So always on means to use the latest technology in terms of transport protocol and transport technology. So going in the telco world, we are talking about 4G, 5G. Today there are pilot of 5G, but the 5G itself will create a lot of new use cases that can be enabled using the smart city concept and using that technology in order to provide a point-to-point communication between objects on the field in order to enable use cases related to smart city. For sure, also distributed cloud is another strong trend that there is behind the scene. We use technology that somehow have a processing capability that is very distributed, is very close to the edge for what is needed at that level. Like, for instance, the enrichment should be done locally, not on the edge, but really close to the edge. Other capability like the intelligence, artificial intelligence and machine learning capability typically are done on a centralized level. This logic to have multiple layers that are managed geographically speaking in a distributed cloud, it's very important. Another element, the last two comments I want to do is on the basically ability to integrate third-party content. That's a very important aspect. Coming to the ecosystem example I was doing at the beginning, this drives the possibility to make the perfect equation that 1 + 1 make 3 in terms of business value. So adding more component, we create new use cases and we enable the ability to enlarge the value chain. And the microservice concept, so the ability to have a very atomic element on the technology side in order to build new and different use cases that rotate around the customer, creating very tailor-made and customized services. All of this is behind the scene. We are not very, let's say, used to be visible to the technology, but the technology behind is a very strong enabler and very important aspect that drives the possibility to arrive to a customer 360 view.
Okay, let's try to wrap things up before moving on to the next part of our session. We've introduced the scenario of big data and IoT. We investigated what these data tsunami mean for each of us and how big data and IoT can generate value for the business. We have tried to draw a picture of the technological complexity and of the prerequisites needed to turn IoT into business value. Now, in the next few minutes, we'll try to look into OCTO's experience when it comes to big data and IoT, how OCTO is able to deliver business value for its client, and what the future is in store for a company born 18 years ago this year, exactly with the purpose of making data actionable. Tina, why don't you tell us how data became a clear box and what changes OCTO has brought since its inception 18 years ago?
Yes, thank you. So Fabio was joking before about speaking about the dark side of the moon, considering the technology side of the IoT and big data. For sure, when we say black box to refer to the technology that is installed in a car, this doesn't inspire positive thinking. So the reason why we like in OCTO refer to this black box as the clear box is because the technology inside the car, in this car, so this sensor, allowed since the beginning to improve the operation between the policyholder and the insurance company. Let's consider, for example, the process to set a claim. And this changing completely the relation between the policyholder and this market towards what now is already a fact: more personalized services, a stronger customer engagement, and also a fair pricing that is based right on the individual risk profile of the consumer. So from the clear box to the now natively equipped telematic control units that are available in the newest vehicle, the travel experience is more and more enriched also from new interaction with additional, let's say, sensors that are in the car, and information that comes from adjacent market to the insurance one, that are the car maker, fleet management operators, and the mobility sharing operators. And this kind of convergent, let's say, goes towards a new mobility as a service concept that is, according to us, the point of arrival of the smart mobility. Overcoming also the historical fragmentation that there is in the process of mobility, and in some way was a kind of barrier to the development. On the same page, progressing on the side of the business, we must consider that at the end, the user is the chooser of this service, but is always the same person that must buy a car, must issue an insurance policy, and also must use as in the city a service of car sharing. So in this sense, also the consumer market is progressing more and more towards more sophisticated demand, asking for more personalized approach, an omni-channel communication, because they want to be free from the channel that they decide to enter to create this new relation. And also they want to have a unique user experience, which show also as the consumer market is now more mature at the moment and also more available to share data if this sharing is balanced by the real and tangible benefits. So with 18 years of experience in the market of UBI, OCTO is today the worldwide leader in the UBI, but increasingly moving in this mobility or smart mobility arena, playing a primary role in Europe with a portfolio of solution that goes from the fleet telematics, the mobility sharing application, and also some, let's say, vertical application for the OEM and the utilities. Acting as a hub of the data-driven ecosystem, as mentioned before, also Fabio, that is an open world and a very, let's say, open ecosystem. Our multiple use case for mobility allows us to realize this integrated customer journey, which the market can experience through a simple app. So the app is the open door to transfer the intelligence that is behind the scene into actionable insight for the consumer market for a real win-win-win approach and a real win-win-win market story. So our more than 6 million connected user and all the data that are captured to profile and both the driving style, but also detect crash and reconstruct crash, are also combined with a number of huge number of operation and transaction that are the daily operation that we need to act, for example, to lock and unlock the vehicle, to book a vehicle in the mobility sharing, or also to, let's say, evaluate the residual value for the service of predictiveness of the usage of the car that are more, let's say, addressed to the car maker or the fleet manager. And this is the, let's say, what we say, that the value for each stakeholder. We can manage a different data that comes from the mobility, but we can deliver value in a different way to the different stakeholder.
Okay, it sounds really great how a simple yet powerful idea like the Clearbox can turn into a profitable business and also open new markets. But through its 18 years of being in business, OCTO has never stopped innovating and has contributed to change for the better the nature of the relationships between insurance companies and their customers, providing both of them with measurable value. And this is just the tip of the iceberg as related to the things that OCTO can do. Fabio, can you help us understand how OCTO deals with actionable data and IoT starting from the insurance market?
Yeah, sure. So this is just an example of how data can provide business value and actionable insight to a typical traditional use case. So in the insurance market, what are typically doing the insurance company? Basically, insurance companies are playing the game in three major aspects. First is to price a risk. So they need to classify, identify, understand the risk behind a single person and put behind a price for that. They need to be able to support and manage a claim, and they need to manage the customer. In the traditional insurance, all those aspects are done based on very, let's say, paper-based in the best case, so data coming from paper, so long time to process, or even based on demographic data, so statistics and so on and so forth. Nothing related to real personalized experience. What OCTO has done in this segment is to try to use the data collected from the field to innovate in those segments. So as an example of applicability on the pricing, for sure, we introduced the concept of driving scoring. So the ability to provide a score that somehow evaluate and assess the risk of a person driving. We introduced the concept of telematic claim. So the ability to collect data from a crash event, support the user in the real, let's say, problem. So in the moment of truth that he is currently having, and providing a personalized customer experience. Those, let's say, three elements basically have a very solid background and drives the ability to support, let's say, the use of data to transform it in actionable item, actionable information to support business, in this case, insurance company, to provide personalized scoring. This means personalized pricing, support the moment of truth with data, so ability to support the emergency at the moment, and the background process of a claim management inside the insurance company. All of those touch points improved by a personalized customer experience.
Great. So we can say that the insurance market is by far the one that has gained most from OCTO's actionable big data and IoT solutions. But the insurance market is just only a part of the whole pictures of what OCTO can do. Big data are also at the very heart of how mobility will evolve in the future to comply with the needs of sustainability and to the new configuration of what we call smart cities. Tina, tell us how OCTO makes us use of big data to understand and improve mobility in today's and tomorrow's cities.
So we can consider cars and the Clearbox technology as the city sensor, because they already provide the useful information about traffic today. And this sensor has a unique characteristic that, unlike fixed sensors as camera, they are adaptive sensor to measure real time the human mobility, because they are in the right place where they are needed, that is in the traffic flow. Thanks to this feature, it's also possible to analyze from the historical data lots of other phenomenon and trend of the mobility. For example, measure flows in that are in and out of the city, so the famous origin destination matrix. Measure also the systematic and occasional mobility of commuters, and also be able to detect a cluster of travelers based on the common habits. These provide insight and new knowledge about the city that help to take better decisions also for future plans. The mobility data also generate knowledge that, for example, can be used to detect the point of attraction of a city, there is the place where we go more frequently and where we stop, that are important information also to plan, for example, new additional service in the city, new parks, for example, or to define where to put the recharger for the electric vehicles based on the mobility profiles that are associated to the specific cluster of the electrified cars. This kind of application allows us to study, in the respect of the privacy and the regulation, the mobility of the crowds, and also to bring back useful information to the citizens. So the floating car data in some way define the morphology of the city to support the new plan for private and public mobility, to design new service and open also what we call the new digital roads. In the picture that we have here, we have a free city that are London, Rome, and Boston. If you look at the shape, there is no cartographic layer below, but they are well identified from the trace of the data, of the floating car data. We are the atoms behind the dot that you see, and joining lots of these dots, we can see the microscope of the human mobility to study it as we do, for example, with the weather, having now the capability also to forecast our mobility flow, of course, for the social goods, as we have never done before.
Absolutely fascinating. So once again, OCTO is well positioned to change the way we live, and it's contributing to share a future which is closer than we think, actually. As Fabio will outline in a moment, OCTO, though, is not only shaping the future, but it's also able to act swiftly to create data-driven solutions to unexpected issues like the unfortunate event we have been living in the last 4 months with the pandemic, issues that are changing our lives and forcing us to move into a new normal where data are once again key. Is that right, Fabio?
Yes, absolutely. I want to make some, let's say, a few examples of, let's call it smart services that we have thought during the COVID. Unfortunately, we know that during lockdown there were mobility restriction. So we use our mobility data lab to develop, let's say, a model to study the mobility flow inside the different countries that were under lockdown, in order to, let's say, help the public authorities to verify the effectiveness of the lockdown and the limitation of the mobility. This for sure is done using the different type of vehicle, using the different type of geography, considering the in-town and out-of-town movement. So it's a very analytic tool that was used during the lockdown period in order to help the public authority to work it out and monitor the progress of the mobility flows. But also coming to, let's say, product connected to the COVID era, we can call it, we can mention Around Me, that is a solution to use for social distancing between people. So something that help people to manage the prevention, let's say, to get the infection, or other, like the purifier, that help let's say, clean space inside the vehicle in order to, let's say, manage, for instance, during the car sharing, the cleanup of the car between one rental and the other. Those are all examples of, let's say, new services generated by data and enabled by data, but let's say that no one has thought before the COVID. So in this case, is a typical example of application done with the use of data in the unfortunate emergency that we have all faced.
Okay, thank you very much. We are almost running out of time. And I just wanted to say that, well, I have a sentence from one of my favorite authors, who is Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, who said, "It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data." Of course, it was referred to his method of investigation. The times were totally different, but the idea was first data, then the theory and solution to complicated cases. Today, we are in an ideal position to provide solution by leveraging on data, and OCTO is proof that actionable data are more than just theory. Thank you very much for listening to us. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Fabio.
Thank you.
Just a last note about the forthcoming Smart Talks will take place in July the 2nd. OCTO this time will dig deeper in artificial intelligence and the management of claims and frauds. As we just said, more than just theory. Thanks again. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.